So for the results of our interview study, we conducted 29 interviews. So 15 of those were with patient partners and 14 were with researchers. And through these interviews, we identified 5 core themes that were coming through. So the first theme in particular was a shift in scientific culture is required. So this suggests that the nature and culture of preclinical research does pose some unique barriers. So for example, lab research is typically non-patient facing. So these are barriers that we need to consider when discussing patient engagement within these areas. Theme number 2 was understanding the value of patient engagement. So this really highlighted that the preclinical researchers that were being interviewed and are currently engaging patients, they're very passionate about it and they see great value in this practice. However, changing the mindset of others may be needed for wider spread implementation. For theme number 3, the need to take a thoughtful and tailored approach. So this demonstrates the importance of involving patients early, establishing and maintaining relationships. And again, a finding that we found in our scoping review is kind of mirrored here, but creating a comfortable environment with open lines of communication where everyone can feel comfortable sharing their views. Theme number 4, clear and common language is required. This emphasizes the importance of addressing the technical terminology that's often used by scientists. So this is especially important within engagement in this field, especially since a lot of the engagement activities were communication-based, so priority setting and these roundtable discussions, it's important that we address this common language. And then finally, for theme number 5, we noticed that there were varied aims and motivations for preclinical patient engagement. So this suggested that while researchers had varied motivations or objectives for engaging patients in this research, so for example, some were motivated to learn about the patient perspective or improve research relevance, but a lot of the patient motivations, they were mostly motivated by their past clinical experiences and thus motivated to improve and advance research and care for future patients. So they were more focused on the downstream implications of the work that was being done. So 2 key takeaways from the interview study results are that cultural changes may encourage achieved through offering guidance or support, resources, and perhaps endorsement for researchers to engage with patients at this stage of research. Second, the importance of education. So it's important that we clarify any perceptions that may be hindering preclinical patient engagement. So maybe this thought that patients might not be interested, or making it clear the benefits that we're seeing from engagement in this space. So with that said, I'll just launch the 3rd poll here. And the purpose of this one is to just gauge your comfort level with engagement or patient engagement within this space after hearing a little bit about the background and the work that's being done. And yeah, some examples of engagement. So I'm sure everyone can see this, I think. So great, we have some people that are more confident, some people that are about the same. This is all great. And it's okay to be unsure about patient engagement as well, if that's where you're at. There's a lot of information coming at you, so completely understandable there. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. Thanks everyone for participating in the polls. Wonderful. Okay, great. I'll just close this. Okay, and then I think I'm going to hand it off to, oh no, I'm going to touch on some of the framework stuff as well. So yeah, so in terms of next steps, we're really shifting our focus to using the results that we found from the scoping review and the interview study to inform the development of a framework that will ultimately support both researchers and patient partners throughout patient engagement and preclinical laboratory research. So to start off, we wanted to look at any existing frameworks that were more clinically driven maybe, or just any frameworks to lay our foundation for our preclinical specific framework that we want to develop. So our SPORE program facilitator was able to point us to a number of clinical and patient engagement frameworks, which was great. And from this selection, we chose the framework produced by Chippy and colleagues. as this was developed through a very comprehensive and rigorous method. So ultimately, this framework was synthesized from existing frameworks that were identified through a systematic review and an environmental scan. So one great aspect of this framework is that it has two parts to it. The first is integral components. So these are important considerations for patient engagement in general, but it also has a more practical guidance aspect to it as well. So this is where we can outline specific activities to engage patients throughout the different stages of research. So we're currently mapping our scoping review findings to the key themes identified by Chippy and colleagues, which are shown here. And one thing that we're noticing is that our scoping review and our interview study findings suggest that the co-learning domain is especially important in preclinical patient engagement. And this is because there may be a larger knowledge gap for both researchers who maybe don't interact with patients every day and between patient partners who may not have research background or the background knowledge about the topic or the techniques that are being used. And I'll hand it off to Manoj now.
Great. So this is a very, very early draft of some of our thoughts here. And this is co-produced by our patient partners on our team, the researchers, preclinical researchers on our team, and some of our research assistants and associates that are on the team as well too. We've broken this down to a conceptual phase, a conduct phase, and a publication phase. And here's just some very general ideas on how that might look. Priority setting, obviously something we found in scoping review and has been a big component of how patients have been engaged in preclinical research to date. Helping with funding and just that education and the co-learning process as well too, I think is a big piece there. We've had that experience already with some early phase clinical trials where the people who are actually producing a cell therapy product that we were using, it was a CAR T cell therapy for hematologic malignancies like blood cancers. The people in the lab, and again, they were people who in some cases had been studying hematologic malignancies for decades at that point and had never actually talked to a patient about their experience of having a lived through a hematologic malignancy. Or lived with one. So, as a clinician myself, I didn't fully appreciate that because now I interact with patients almost on a daily basis. However, for these lab-based scientists, again, behind these security doors, they don't have that sort of interaction. And afterwards, that was one of the biggest things they said was just so eye-opening for them and something they found such great value in was just that interaction and learning a bit more about the lived experience of what they've, in some cases been studying for decades. So. Aside from that, conduct, I think this is one where we'll have to think a bit more on how this is going to look. But, I think clinical trials are, again, more intuitive in many ways. They deal with humans like us as the participants versus things we do in the lab are often cells or animal models, and it's a bit more removed. The techniques and methods, often take years to master, basically, as well too. We have had one of our lab researchers in a group I'm part of, right before the pandemic, they had actually set up for a patient partner to come into the lab and actually do some stuff in the lab, which required, getting through a lot of red tape. Unfortunately, the pandemic happened and they haven't been able to do that yet, but that is something that, will be interesting to follow over the next year when labs start to open up a bit more and she's able to do that. So, we are looking at this. And then finally, again, this dissemination phase or publication phase where I think patient partners can play a big role in terms of raising awareness in the general public around what's been happening in these particular labs and dissemination in other ways of that information. And then finally, I think very important is, once that relationship has actually been established, evaluating that relationship between the patient partners and the researchers on the team as well too. And so in terms of next steps, just very briefly, we're going to start piloting aspects of this framework. We've already started this with a grant that my group has through Sepsis Canada, which is a CIHR funded group. We are looking for other preclinical researchers to participate in a piloting exercise downstream. We're looking for funding to do this as well too. I think we'll eventually get that in the next year. So if you do know of any preclinical researchers or you're a patient partner even that would be interested in, partnering with some preclinical researchers, Grace's email is there, and we've provided our emails at the end as well too, so you can record that and give us a shout. And then hopefully over the next year we'll be able to, spread and scale a little bit in terms of what we're doing here.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, we thought we'd leave you with some tips. It seems like most of you are fairly familiar with patient engagement, but it never hurts to be reminded of some good best practices. So some of the things that really worked for our team here was we co-created terms of reference at the start of the project. So Grace, her colleague Madison, worked with the patient partners on the team so we could understand that we had clear roles, responsibilities, and expectations. And honestly, for those of you who are researchers, you might look at these so-called patient engagement tips and think, actually, those are decent tips for any research team, not just ones that engage patients. The team hosted regular meetings that we were always invited to, but the beauty of the team is that sometimes there were meetings only with patient partners. So it was almost like a little working group where we were working on some things that we were really engaged in. So we met separately from the team. And if we couldn't be at team meetings, there were always opportunities for us to meet in different ways. And Grace talked about that too, making sure that you engage kind of in a thoughtful and tailored way with your patient partners. Patient partners had support and recognition. And for those of you who know me, I've written, and I always harp on honorarium and compensation at least being offered to patient partners. I see that as helping with equity and helping bring people to the team who maybe can't normally be part of a team. So this group knows me, and honoraria were offered to those who wanted to accept it. And as Grace indicated, we contributed to writing the manuscripts, and that did meet the authorship criteria that are out there. So we were authors on manuscripts. And then team members were accessible and available whenever we had questions. So, our engagement certainly wasn't limited to the regular team meetings. There were always touch points in between. And, these are just a few things that really worked for our team. So we thought we'd end with those. But again, for those of you who are engaged with Bryn and her work, she's got all kinds of resources, and she can point you into all kinds of directions in terms of how to do patient engagement well. So with that, I'll hand it back to Manoj.
Great. Just really quickly, just acknowledging members of our team. Patient partners are off to the side there. Catherine Hendrick was our first patient partner in this, and she's the one who tolerated a day-long meeting. It was at Niagara Lake, so it was at least a nice location. But that actually really kicked off a lot of this program and got us thinking around how we could actually implement patient engagement in preclinical research. There's folks from across the country, as you can see here, and this work has been funded by CIHR and SPORE today. I was going to point out our Twitter handles are there again, and then Grace and I have provided our emails as well. So if you do have any specific questions or thoughts, please feel free to email either myself or both of us.
Hi, this is Mridula. I'm working as an oncology clinical trials manager, and my educational background is in medical pharmacology. Before that, I started my career as a medical lab technologist. So I'm always fascinated with translational research at every point. And now that I'm involved more into the conduct of clinical trials, it's amazing. I really appreciate the initiative that you guys have taken here, because if the innovation is not user-friendly, it's a loss to all the time and effort and all the funds and everything. And also, it's good to involve patients at the translational research level itself, because I see a lot of questions myself. I do trials with devices and different types of medications. If the issue is with the swallowing, but then the drug itself is like you have huge number of pills, the size, it's not helpful to the patient. So from my point, it's a very great initiative, and I would like to learn more about this and see if, because we see patient engagement during the clinical trials because we want them to be engaged. And a lot of sponsors like pharma groups, they are developing their own strategies for this. So it is a great initiative, and thank you for this session.
Thanks for that comment. And I think that's an interesting comment at the very end, especially around the industry. So they've been looking at this quite a bit as well too. Both Dawn and Grace were actually involved in PFMD. Maybe Dawn, you want to speak on that quickly? I don't know.
Yeah, there's an international initiative called the Patient-Focused Medicines Development Initiative, or PFMD. They're a not-for-profit organization that's primarily funded through their membership, which has a lot of pharma members. And they have, as Manoj said, really been developing frameworks for medicines development around engaging patients. So right from preclinical through to clinical trials and sharing clinical trial results, et cetera. I'll be honest, I see a lot more of this happening in Europe than I do in North America. And that's, I think, partially because also the regulator there is, I guess I'll say, very innovative and forward thinking about patient engagement as well, although we're seeing quite a bit of that from the FDA in the US, and Health Canada is getting there, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think the difference between what PFMD is doing versus what we're doing, well, PFMD is covering the whole spectrum of research, basically. First of all, we're focused on the preclinical, and we're also focused on the academic side. So versus PFMD is very much industry-led. There's some comments here. So just scrolling back, there's some good comments in between there. So I did give a quick answer as to what I thought the value was, or sorry, how do you convince or explain to researchers who haven't involved patients in the preclinical clinical side how to do, or why they should do it. I said money, it's coming basically. And in terms of funders and them insisting on this, Lauren had a good point there saying that this could lead to tokenism and checkbox. That's certainly what we saw and what I saw as a grant panel member as well too. But rest assured that the people who are evaluating that patient engagement section, which included me and a couple of patient partners actually as well, could very easily read through those. So people are not going to be rewarded for the tokenism or potential tokenism. It's very easy to see through those things because the relationships are clearly not established. They haven't even named a patient partner in some cases as well too. Versus groups who had given it quite a bit of thought, started to establish some relationships in preparation for the grant as well too, and already generated some ideas on how patients could be meaningfully engaged in their program. So